I thought I was done for the day, and I typically don't make a third video any day unless it's something you need to hear pretty immediately. And this is one of those videos. Now, while a lot of people spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt when it comes to what I'm going to say next, this could actually be good news. Yeah, I know, it sounds crazy. NASDAQ futures are down about 0.25%, S&P futures down about 0.22%, 10-year treasury yields are up about 1.5% in futures markets. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, as of now, it is Trump. He vows an additional 10% tariff on China, 25% tariffs on Canada, and Mexico. So let's get this straight. Donald Trump says this on Truth Social tonight, well, at 6:35 p.m. He says, as everyone is aware, thousands of people are pouring through Mexico and Canada, bringing crime and drugs at levels never seen before. Right now, a caravan coming from Mexico, composed of thousands of people, seems to be unstoppable in its quest to come through our currently open border. On January 20th, as one of my many first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States. And it's ridiculous open borders. This tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. Both Mexico and Canada have the absolute right and power to easily solve this long simmering problem. We hereby demand that they use this power, and until such time that they do, it is time for them to pay a very big price. Now, I don't care how you guys feel about this economically or politically. If you've known people that have passed away from drug problems, whether, they were actively, using, or whether they just, were on the bad side of one experience, doesn't matter. I think for the sake of America, this is great, right? How could you not like this? Okay. Great policy. Awesome policy. Force change to happen. From an economic standpoint, it could be problematic. Now, it could be good news, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But Bill Ackman provides a little bit of clarity here, and just so I don't spend the next 5 minutes trying to, explain my take, just listen to Bill Ackman. You guys probably care more about his take anyways. He says, to be clear, according to Trump, the 25% tariffs will not be implemented, or if implemented, will be removed once Mexico and Canada stop the flow of illegal immigrants and fentanyl into the U.S. In other words, Donald Trump is going to use tariffs as a weapon to achieve economic and political outcomes which are in the best interest of America, fulfilling his America First policy. This is a great way for Trump to effect foreign policy changes even before he takes office. So he's effectively giving people over 50 days, or countries, over 50 days to get their act right, start trying to solve these problems before the consequences actually come. This is, giving warning. This is a very, if you could use these words, like, cool thing to do, right? Instead of just all of a sudden slapping these tariffs on these countries because they have not, done their duties in trying to keep drugs out of America. Now, despite that, let's be honest. We're probably not gonna see the flow of drugs, the flow of immigrants just stop. It would take a very dramatic effort from Mexico and Canada to actually get this to happen. Same with China. China's in this as well, but China's only at a 10% tariff via this drug situation. Now, would be in addition to the tariffs that are already in place. Most of Trump's 2016 through 2018 tariffs that were put on China are still in effect. Biden actually just added on to those. And this would be another 10% on top of that. Okay. It's probably going to happen because I doubt the problem is going to be solved in any kind of meaningful way. I mean, that would be a true miracle and you know, God's gift to America if that was actually, if the problem was fixed in 55-ish days. Okay, so you're going to see these tariffs get put on as long as Trump is obviously not, you know, bluffing here. The good news is this could be all. Okay, now Trump was campaigning on a 60% tariff with China. Now, Canada and Mexico, they don't matter as much. Okay, they just don't. I mean, Canada is a little bit more important for their industries, right? We do a lot of business with Canada, but I don't think tariffs are going to be as extreme, right, to Canada. Kind of like a 20% blanket tariff, which you add a 25% here, that's it for Canada. I would be very surprised if Canada were to see any other additional tariffs. So that's definitely it for Canada, in my opinion. China's a little bit of the wild card, but adding another 10% may be the extent of it. And that would be seen as a big, you know, positive for our markets if that is all we get, another 10%. You can think about this in a standard chart of like standard deviations, okay? In terms of the potential outcomes of tariff policies, we'll focus on China here. Obviously, you have 0% tariff being, you know, way on the extreme side, right? 3, 4, 5, 6 standard deviations out there. There's going to be some kind of tariffs. And there's like a 100, 200% blanket tariff on the other extreme side, right? Both of those unlikely. Then you have somewhere closer, like a 60% blanket tariff. What he campaigned on. Still very unlikely, very improbable, right? And then on this side, you have like a 5% tariff. Pretty probable it's going to be more than that. Then you keep going, right? Maybe you have 20% and 40%. Okay, so you get down to what could be like one standard deviation out, which would be like a 20% tariff. That's kind of what the markets have been pricing for. And if we get a 10% tariff from this, depending on if you want to add to the tariffs that are already, you know, still on China, this could be right kind of in line with what markets have been expecting. The problem is for markets, where the markets freak out, we have a trade war with China, is if we have a 60% blanket tariff. Like if Trump actually did what he said in the campaign, you're going to have a recession. You're going to have a huge problem on our hands. But if this is the extent of it, and Wall Street starts to say, that's it, no more tariffs, then that's good. Now, I honestly don't know. Obviously, who am I to say that's the extent of the tariffs that we are going to see? But I could logically make a case that this is actually bullish for markets, because markets are probably going to say this is all we're going to get. Or this is a good chunk of the tariffs that we're going to get. Maybe it's not as bad as we all are fearing, because there's a lot of people that are fearing like a 40, 50, 60% tariff on China. And those are some of the bears out there that you hear from on a regular basis these days. That futures markets are bouncing a bit on this. You're down like, I mean, 0.2% pretty much across the board. This is kind of a typical like day that you would expect after the Russell goes up 2%. So the markets are actually brushing this off quite well. And again, I think with the seasonals that we have, this could boost the quote unquote animal spirits we have in markets even more. Again, Wall Street's going to say, that's it? That's all you got? Obviously, you don't want to taunt Trump too much. You don't want markets to just rip higher and higher and higher, because ultimately this is kind of fishing from Trump, right? It's like, hey, before I'm in the presidency, let's see how much tariffs Wall Street will handle. It's like fishing, right? You fish in a spot a couple times, you cast out, you don't get anything, you move on to a different area. Okay? Same thing here. Trump can't just put on a 60% blanket tariff on China and expect to have a good presidency, right? Expect to get things done. That's just not how it works. The economy will go into a recession. We could have a lot of inflation. Like, you just can't do certain things. So 60% tariff, nobody's really expecting that. Anyone with, logical common sense, that is. But Trump doesn't know if markets would be okay with 10%, 20%, 30%, what the highest, negotiating point that Trump could be at, right? With China. So that's kind of where you're fishing things out. If markets brush off this 10% tariff news, he'll probably try to go for another 10%. And eventually this will be a problem, right? Once, we get another 10%. And Wall Street's not going to like that too much. I think that's kind of what people are expecting, another 20%. So 10 plus 10 is 20. That would be okay. But if you start to get into like the 30-40% tariff range, that's where you probably get a 20% pullback in markets, and that's where you probably drop back to 20% tariffs at maximum, right? So it's a little bit of fishing here. I think markets are probably going to brush it off quite well. Certain stocks could definitely get hurt that have a large connection to China. But generally speaking, I think markets are going to do pretty well. Now, before we wrap up this video, for anyone that is really curious on, what the, Trump tariff situation is about, it's all about negotiating power. Now, this is why I'm really not concerned about tariffs, because one, the markets are going to dictate the amount of tariffs you can put on. If the markets don't like it, if markets price in too much weakness to the economy via tariffs, stocks will just sell off, and then Trump will be forced to kind of go back on what he says. Okay, we've seen this in 2018. S&P fell 20% from October 3rd through December 24th, and all of the tariff rhetoric that was being used at the time got walked back to a reasonable level in which the markets could tolerate. And those tariffs are still on until today, right? Still in effect right now as we speak. Now, during this recent interview, Trump's Commerce Secretary pick, Howard Lutnick, gave an example of how Trump will use tariffs as a bargaining chip. It's all about the art of the deal. It's not about strangling one economy versus the other.
Of course it's a bargaining chip. We can't sell a Ford or GM in Europe. You go to Europe, you can't sell a Ford or GM. Why? There's 100% tariffs. How about in Japan? 100% tariffs. So do you think if we said, we're going to tariff you the way you tariff us, do you think they're going to allow Mercedes and all these Japanese companies and Porsches and BMWs to all of a sudden have 100% tariffs in America? Of course not. They're going to come and negotiate, and their tariffs are going to come down. And finally, Ford and General Motors are going to be able to sell in these places.
How's that sound?
Of course they're going to come down. Of course. This is just negotiating.
It absolutely makes sense. If you do it strategically, if it's across the board, it creates a real problem. And the question is whether you believe the president is going to do it strategically or across the board. He keeps saying it across the board.
Well, when you're running for office, you make broad statements so people understand you.
Right.
Okay? Tariffs are an amazing tool by the president to use. They're an amazing tool, but he understands, don't tariff stuff we don't make. Right? If we don't make it, and you want to buy it, I don't want to put the price up there. It's pointless. But use tariffs to build in America. If we want to make it in America, tariff it. Or if we're competing with it, tariff it. But you got to remember, we need to protect the American worker. Finally, someone's going to protect the American worker. And Donald Trump is here to protect the American worker.
Do you think we make a lot of money in tariffs? Or if they're used as negotiating tactics? Look, tariffs will come down there. We're not going to have super high tariffs here either. There's not going to be a big pot of money at the end of the day.
I love that story. So which is it? Do we make a lot of money on tariffs, or we bring productivity here and we drive up our workers here? So it's a win-win scenario. I like both of them. I think what's going to happen is we'll make a bunch of money on the tariffs, but mostly everybody else is going to negotiate with us, and we will be more fair. In 1948, right? We came up with something called the Marshall Plan, right? The world, Germany and Japan were destroyed after World War II, and we wanted to export our economy to them. So we made a rule. They could tariff us, and we won't tariff them. So they can rebuild.
This is the best explanation I've heard of.
So they can rebuild their economy. We rebuilt their economy using something called the Marshall Plan.
Yeah.
Our economy is so awesome that we'll use it to help you rebuild. When should that have ended? What do you think, 1980? Right? 1985? I mean, why 40 years are Japan and Germany and all of Europe still tariffing the heck out of our auto industry, tariffing the heck out of our furniture industry? Do you realize all your furniture you're buying that's made foreign? It seems crazy. Why? It's because they tariff us and we don't tariff them. It's so obvious.
So hopefully this makes some sense. I know when you're talking about tariffs and other countries and trade and markets expectations, and in my kind of breakdown with standard deviations along the lines of expectations kind of gets confusing, but it looks like this could be a positive, at least for now, for markets, if that's just the extent of the tariffs that we're going to get. Now, clearly not true. It's just fishing, right? But a 10% tariff to start on China doesn't sound terrible. And you can see futures are almost now back in the green, only down about 0.1%. So I know there's going to be a lot of fear mongers out there. And I just want to set it straight that eventually tariffs will cause markets to correct or crash. I'm almost sure of it. But not with a 10% tariff. That's actually good news, at least in the near term. So let me know what you guys think about this down below in the comment section. Have a fantastic night, and I will see you in the next one.